Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. So if you have seen my last video, we have done the setup for InfluxDB on Docker, and we also seen how to connect to InfluxDB and add some data, so which we can use it in this tutorial. Okay, so what we are going to do in this tutorial is we will see how we can deploy Grafana and InfluxDB containers using Docker Compose. So we'll be writing the complete Docker Compose YAML file where we'll be creating two services, one for Grafana and one for InfluxDB. And once we run the Docker Compose up, so we'll be having two containers running, right? And then we will see how we can connect the InfluxDB as a data source for Grafana, and we can plot the charts and other thing which the data is in the InfluxDB. Okay, so that will be the complete tutorial in from this. Okay, so I'm sure it will be very interesting and helpful for you. Okay, so before I start, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, kindly subscribe, like the video, share and comment. So in order to start, I have a machine where the Docker is installed. So if I go for Docker PS, I don't have any containers running. Okay, and I don't have any that containers as well. So what we are going to do is we are going to create the YAML file, okay, for Docker Compose. So I'm going to use a text editor, Sublime Text, and we will write the YAML Docker Compose file there. Then we'll copy into this Docker machine. Okay. So to start, I'm using the text editor, Sublime Text. Okay. So as always, the Docker Compose file start with the version. So if I go to my web browser, okay, and if you see the Docker Compose file version, the latest version is version 3. Okay, so I'm going to use version 3 for this YAML file. Okay, so it will be version and it will be 3. Okay, and always the Docker Compose will have multiple services, right? Services means the containers which we have to create. So in our case, we need two containers. So one is for Grafana, another one is for InfluxDB. Okay, so let me start with Grafana first. Okay, so I'm going to use services. Okay, and I'm going to call this service as Grafana. And for Grafana, I have to use the image. So if you don't know what image you have to use, you can check the hub.docker.com. So I'm going to use Grafana/Grafana. Okay, so that's the image for Grafana. And I'm also going to give a name for this container, so it's not mandatory. So if you has not given any name, it will be taking the default name as per the Docker. Okay, so I'm going to call this container as Grafana. Okay, you can give any name, but I'm calling it Grafana. And I'm also want to give like restart always, so if something happens in the container, it can start automatically. Okay, so the next part is I'm going to use ports. Okay, so for Grafana the port is 3000. Okay, so I'm going to map the same port from both the local host and also from the container. Okay, so if you don't want to use the 3000 as the local computer port, you can use a different port number as well. Okay, I'm going to use some network. Okay, so I don't want to use the default network for this, so I'm going to create a network, and I'm going to call this network as Grafana underscore network. Okay, so why I'm creating this network is I'll be using the same network for the InfluxDB container as well. So both these containers will be using same network. So I'm done with networks. So next part I'm going to use volumes. Okay, so this is not mandatory again, so if you don't want to have a persistent volume, you don't have to do it. So I'm going to call the volume as Grafana underscore data, and I'm going to map this to var/lib/Grafana. Okay, so this is the location for Grafana, the data from Grafana. So I'm creating a Docker volume called Grafana underscore data. Okay, and I'm also going to add something called depends on. Okay, depends on. So, and I'm going to call this as influxdb. Okay, so we don't have this container yet, so, or the service yet, but I'm going to call this as influxdb. Then we'll be creating this service as the next step. Okay, so if you see, the first part is done. So the first service what we have created is Grafana. Okay, so it has the image Grafana, right, and the container name and restart always, and I have set the port 3000, and also I'm using a network. So if you don't want to use this, you can remove this commands network or volumes. You can remove it, so it doesn't matter. You can even remove the container name or restart always as well. So if you want to simplify it, you can just give an image and the port. Okay, so let's create the next service. I'm going to call this as influxdb. You need to call this as influxdb because we are giving the same name as depends on here. Okay, okay, let me give us some space. Okay, and I need to use the image here, and I'm going to call influxdb and the version latest. Okay, so if you don't give the tag latest, also still it will take latest version of your image. And similar to Grafana, I'm going to call this container name. I'm going to call this as influxdb. Okay, so that will be the container name, and restart always. Okay, so it's similar to what we have done for Grafana. And the ports, so next is for ports, and the port used for influxdb is 8086. So I'm going to use the same in both the host and from the container. Okay, and again the network. Okay, so here again I have to use Grafana underscore network. Why? Because both the Grafana container and also the influxdb container should be on the same network. So if you want to give a different name, you can give a different name as well, but both the network should be same. Then only both this container will be able to communicate. If you give two network, then we will not be able to use the influxdb data source for the Grafana container. Okay, and next step, we are going to use volumes. Okay, and I'm going to call this volume as influxdb underscore data, and the path inside the container will be varlib slash influxdb. Okay, so we are done with volumes as well. Okay, now for the database, there is something new which I'm going to use. I'm going to use environment. Okay, so why? Because I want to set some specific database in this influxdb container. I also want to set some user for this database and also set some password. Okay, so let's do that. So the first one what I want to use is influxdb underscore db. So what it will do is it will create a database when we create the container, and I'm going to call this as Grafana, the database name. And the next one which I want to do is I want to create a user. Okay, so I'm going to use influxdb underscore user, and I'm going to call this user also Grafana. Okay, because I'm using this user to connect to Grafana. And I also want to create a password for this, so it's going to be influxdb underscore user underscore password. Okay, and I'm going to give a password called password. Okay, I also want to enable the admin account for influxdb, so I'm going to use influxdb underscore admin underscore enabled, which will be true. And I also want to set a password for it. Okay, so it will be influxdb admin underscore user, and I'm going to call this user as admin. Okay, let me call this as admin. Okay, I'm sorry, it's keep coming back with some content auto-populated. content. Okay, and I also want to set the password for this. Okay, so it should be influxdb underscore admin underscore password. Okay, so these are some environmental variables I want to set. So that's all with this service. So we are done with InfluxDB service as well. So you can see like we have used the image, container name, restart, the port 8086, the Grafana underscore network, and we are mapping to the volume InfluxDB underscore data. Okay, and we have created an environmental variable, so it will create a database called Grafana and a user called Grafana, and the password will be set for it as password, and the admin user will be admin and the password will be admin. Okay, now in order to finish this we need to have some more thing to be done. Okay, because we have a network configured here and also volumes, so that's also need to be mentioned in this Docker Compose file. So if you see, I went to the starting, right? So it has to be like this. So the networks will be Grafana underscore network. Okay, we don't need the hyphen here. Okay, and volumes will be Grafana underscore data, and it should be influxdb underscore data. Okay, so we are done with the Docker Compose file. So let me just a little bit minimize this so you can see the whole Docker Compose file. So you can see like we started with version and we created two services, one for Grafana and one for InfluxDB, and the Grafana is depending on InfluxDB, right? And there is a network, and I'm sorry, the network should be Grafana underscore network, not data. Okay, so if you give wrong it will not work. Okay, so it's the network name is Grafana underscore network, and the volume name is Grafana underscore data and InfluxDB underscore data. Okay, so let me save this and let me copy this. Okay, so we can copy this into the Docker machine. Okay, so let me go back here, and I have created a folder called Grafana, so let me go into that, and there is nothing inside it. So let me create a file called docker compose.yaml. Okay, and I'm going to paste that content here. So if you see, the content is what we have created inside the file. So don't worry, I'll be sharing all the link from my GitHub location, so you can copy this from there and you can use it. Okay, so let me save this file, and now we need to create the Docker containers, right? For that, what we need to use is Docker Compose up. Okay, Docker Compose up means it will use this Docker Compose.yaml file. If this file is in different name, you need to specify it with -c and the file name. Okay, but it's in the Docker Compose.yaml, I don't have to mention it, but I want to run it in a detached mode so it does not stay on the screen after creating the containers. Okay, so I will just use -d and let me just run it. So don't worry about this message. Okay, it's a Python message, and you can see warning Docker engine you are using in Docker Swarm mode. This is because I'm using a Docker Swarm setup, and this is one of the node from it. Okay, so if you are using a normal Docker setup, it's not a problem. You will not be getting that message. Okay, you can see it's done very quickly because I already have the images downloaded in my machine. So if you don't have that, it will take some time to download the image. Okay, now if I go to Docker PS, you can see two containers are running, right? One for Grafana and one for InfluxDB. And if you see the names, you can see the name Grafana InfluxDB as we have given, right? Now in order to access Grafana, you need to use the host IP and the port 3000. Okay, so this machine IP address is 192. Where is it? Just checking. Yeah, here it is. It's 192.168.145.130. So let me copy this. Okay, so let me put that here, and 3000. Okay, so now we can see Grafana is loaded, and the default username and password for Grafana is admin. Okay, so let me log in with that. Admin. Okay, and let's set a new password. Okay, so now we can see I'm logged in inside the Grafana. Okay, so now the next step is I need to connect to the data source. Okay, so I need to use Influxdb, right? And I need to give the host URL. So host URL will be the same IP address and 8086. Okay, and the access will be default server. Okay, and what I need to do is I need to give the database name. So I'm going to use Grafana, which is the database I created, and also the username is Grafana, and the password I set it in that environmental variable. Okay, and the choose method I'm going to use get, because I'm going to use the get content from the database to Grafana. I'm not going to write anything into the database. Okay, so that's why it's a get, and I'm going to test it. Now if you see, I got a message like bad gateway. Okay, this is basically because the port 8086 is not open in my machine which is running this container. Okay, so what I can do is you can run this command. So I'll run this command for sudo firewall permanent zone public at the port 8086. Okay, the same way, if your Grafana is not opening at 3000 port, you need to add that as well to the firewall exception. Okay, and I'm going to restart or reload the firewall. Okay, now if I go back to the Grafana and let me test it, now you can see the data source is working, right? So if I go back to my home screen, so we are done complete with the data source, right? If I go to create dashboard, create a new panel, the default will be Influxdb, right? And if you see the measurement, I don't see anything over here. Why? Because we don't have any content inside the Influxdb container. Okay, so let me go back here. Okay, I'll delete this panel and I'll go back to my machine. Okay, now if you have seen my previous tutorial, you know how to add this sample content. Okay, so I'm going to use docker exec -it, and I'm going to connect the Influxdb. Okay, so I'm inside the Influxdb now. Okay, and I can call influx, so I'm inside the database, and if I show databases, you can see there are two. One is underscore internal and Grafana I have created, and I'm going to use the database Grafana. Okay, so I'm inside that, and if I show measurements, there is nothing to show. Okay, so now I have to add some content into the database. So I'm going to add some content. Okay, so I'm going to use the command insert and CPU and the host name and some values. Okay, so similar way you can add more content. Okay, so let me add more. So I'm using a server B here. Okay, so let me run this as well. Okay, so you can just use your own content, and you can add. There's other ways also. You can use import command, and you can import some database from an CSV or something directly to Influxdb as well. Okay, so this I just want to show it simply because it's an insert command. You can run it on the screen itself. Okay, otherwise you can use some text file or something which you can write all these things and you can import it. Okay, so let's create more. Okay, so I will just pause this so I can add more content, and then we'll go back to the Grafana screen. Now if you have seen, I have imported some content. Okay, so let me clear the screen, and I'm going to call show measurement. Now you can see there is something called CPU, right? So now I'm going to select everything from CPU. You can see different timestamp and host name and the values which I have imported. Right, now let's go back to the Grafana. Okay, let me create a new dashboard. Okay, so I'm going to create a new panel. So let me create a new panel, and now if you see the measurement, I can see something called CPU, right? Because what we have imported is showing up here. And now you see, you can start seeing some content as well, right? Because we just add some data, that's why it's showing only very few data over here. So now you see, like, we see only some content because last 6 hours there's not much. So let me use the last 5 minutes, so you can see it's showing up here, right? So a lot of dots, right? So you can see we are selecting the measurement, and from where we can even add the host, and the host you can select server A or server B because we have added that, right? So that's another option. So let me use server A. Okay, and if you want to use some other mean or some other values, you can use something like that. Count, maybe, you know, you can see the count over here. Let me remove this. If you want something else, you can see some. Yeah. So there are different ways you can do it, so you can check what is actually required for your, you know, dashboard. Okay, so you can also use different visualization, whether you want to do it in this way or this way. Okay, or a bar gauge or tables, or, you know, heat map. So you can use different things. Okay, so let me put this as a graph. Okay, and I'll put sample 1. Maybe also put it as, you know, some changes, which maybe I want to have bigger bars, right, or less. Okay, this is also fine. Yeah, some points. So you can check what all things you can do here. Okay, so for more information on Grafana, I had a separate tutorial on Grafana. So, okay, so you can see there how you can separate the install Grafana, integrate with Prometheus, and export the, you know, the Prometheus data into the Grafana, and you can create beautiful chart from there. So you can have a look from there. Okay, so let me save this new dashboard, save it. So you got one sample. Maybe let's add one more panel. Okay, and let's add measurement as CPU again. Okay, and I'm not going to add anything over here, so let's put you know, a gauge here. So let's call this sample 2. So if you want any other format, you can use that as well. Okay, let me save this. So let me go back. So now you can see there are 2 dashboards. You can drag and drop, and you can keep it in a which way you want. Okay, I think it's a little bit bigger, that's why. Let me make it smaller. Okay, so you can do all these things, but what I wanted to show is just you know, the integration with InfluxDB. So we saw like how we can use the data source in InfluxDB, right? So you see how we can connect the InfluxDB data source, right? So we are connected with that, and you know, we are making use of the content from there. Okay, so you can see there are other data sources like Prometheus, Graphite, right, and Loki, Elasticsearch. So there are a lot of options which we will see in the upcoming tutorials. Okay, so that is all I wanted to share as part of this tutorial. I hope this is informative for you, and I thank you for watching. Kindly subscribe to my channel, like these videos, share and comment.